Young people, gather around because I want to tell you about the Lady Gaga moral panic of 2009. It was especially pronounced in Christian circles at that point. I don't know for sure if it was actually 2009. It was something like that. It was the year that she wore the meat suit to the Met Gala or award show or whatever. I mean, literally an outfit that she made of meat. And I'm not even sure that was the weirdest outfit that she wore. She's just goofy. Stephanie Germanotta, I think, is her actual name. I think she's wildly talented and has done all kinds of things that I really, frankly, appreciate. I think she's a pretty smart gal. But she's provocateur, and a lot of her shtick early in the game to get past the breakers, get past the noise of all the people trying to break into the world of pop music and celebrity culture and whatnot. Like her shtick was to be completely outrageous. And of course, a lot of people are going to look at that and probably for some good reasons be like, there's something weird morally here. I'm not sure this is a really good idea. Kids should watch out for that. And again, it's probably a perfectly valid opinion. There was some weird stuff there. And, other people, of course, are going to look at that and they're going to be like, old people, get off my lawn. Old people never like new things that the kids do. And this is just like it's always been forever. And I'm not sure I totally agree with that either, but there's definitely get off my lawniness that exists. And so that little debate, that little cultural crisis du jour, there's always some corrupting character that we've kind of got our eyes on. That she was the one at that point. And I remember that being something kind of chuckleable at the time because it was such a ridiculous shtick. But when all of that was going on, I was traveling back and forth to Zambia in kind of South Central Africa. And I was working at a college there with a bunch of students from Malawi and Zambia, just kind of that little neck of the woods. And these students were just brilliant. Every single one of them spoke a gazillion languages. I mean, this is the cream of the crop, just remarkable young people. But in order to get enough people involved and have the resources, this college drew on a very diverse group of people to be involved. There were just a few folks who kind of radiated this behavior first vibe and very conservative behavioral standards that weren't necessarily even in keeping with the people we were working with there in Zambia. And I remember on that trip, I think it was 2009, there was somebody who was really mad about Lady Gaga. They were really mad about the meat suit. And at that same time, there were a couple of students who maybe had liked Lady Gaga, clicked like on their Facebook page, or maybe they'd quoted a lyric. I don't even remember what it was. It's not that big a deal. And I remember these folks were just really upset and they wanted something done to discipline those students because that's a very corrupting influence and it's bad. And like I said, maybe Lady Gaga is bad. I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag, whatever. It's just not something I'm terribly worried about then or at this point. But it just struck me as odd, man, that really legalistic, rule-oriented, I'm going to watch you, I'm a watchdog, I'm going to keep an eye on that behavior real closely, even if we've never met, to make sure it meets up to my feeling about how Christians ought to be culturally. And man, people don't really like that shtick very much where I live here in the United States, but I'm going to go and I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to export that, and I'm going to try to get people in another country halfway around the world to share these same values and get upset about these same things that aren't really central to the equation at all. And I remember just kind of going away from there and flying home and feeling like, gross. We all just came over for this little 2-week session or whatever, and it just seems like part of the net product of what we did here is that we exported something that isn't really that healthy or beautiful. That's kind of a weird permutation of sort of our faith from our part of the world that isn't working. And we went and it's like we tried to earn converts for that in another part of the world that isn't wired that way anyway. I'm like, why would we want to duplicate that? So I'm glad we went and tried to give away our faith and do Christian things. It was just kind of gross feeling that was the element that we were giving away. And I think in Matthew chapter 23, thanks for indulging that very long story, by the way. It's certainly far more than you needed, but it's what came to mind when I was looking at the passage that we're looking at today in Matthew chapter 23, starting in verse 15, which is the second of these 7 woes. I don't think there's a ton to break down here biblically. I mean, this condemnation that Jesus is throwing out at the Pharisees in the temple area in front of everybody, it sort of speaks for itself. This is what he says. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Okay, look, I'm not quite prepared to say that the folks that I thought behaved a little bit quirkily on that particular trip, who were people I had never met before and have never met since, I'm not really even fit to like judge them or evaluate them completely. I don't know. I'm not saying that like they were going and converting people to like what Jesus would call sons of hell. Like, I really don't want to make that accusation. What I am saying is I know the equation that one might eventually run when you think about the amount of resources and energy that are being spent to go far, far away to reach out with this thing that you think is really important that you reach out with, and then to look at the actual message you're taking with you and be like, wait a minute, I'm not sure that's actually the message. Like, is that really our thing? And would it actually really be good if we took that to all of planet Earth and got everybody to sign up for it? I'm not sure we would want to do that. And that seems to be the math equation that Jesus is inviting the Pharisees, or more likely the squishy middle, the people who aren't sure what to make of what the Pharisees are saying or what Jesus is saying in this passage. I think it's more like what he's inviting them to think about. Does this equation make sense? Now, what he's referencing is this accommodation or willingness that existed in some pockets of religious thought in the first century in Judea and Jerusalem that would allow for outsiders, sometimes called God-fearers, people who were not ethnically Jewish but suspected that the God of Abraham might be the actual true God. It seems like there was some impulse toward refining the system by which someone might go from being a part of whatever they were culturally to becoming a part of Judaism, which is really pretty cool. And if you've been hanging around at all for this conversation we've been having about Matthew, like I want to try to give the Pharisees credit anywhere we can. I want to give them empathy anywhere we can, because I really relate to them and feel like if I were alive in this story, I would be one of them, not one of the people who comes off looking good. So to their credit, it looks like they're at least open to the idea. And maybe there were even a few Pharisee types who actually went out and pounded some pavement, like in the way Paul would do a few decades later, to go and try to connect with people and move them into this process, or to find the wayward Jewish person who isn't walking with God and to make this connection. It looks like maybe this is indicative of some kind of proto-missionary mindset, which maybe would cause the squishy middle, who aren't quite sure what to make of the Pharisees or of Jesus in this passage, to look at them and be like, yeah, they're jerks. And that first woe seems fair, and I do see that hypocrisy Jesus is talking about in them, but they try so hard, though. Like, you got to admit, like especially those two guys, like, they go on long trips and they come back with slideshows, and they're doing something, even if what they're exporting maybe isn't ideal. Like, you got to respect their hustle and their commitment. And I'd agree. Like, they respect their hustle and their commitment. That's awesome. And maybe Jesus is even acknowledging that hustle and commitment, the travel over land and sea to win a single convert. I mean, that sounds like leaving the 99 behind to go and get the one lost sheep. That's really cool. Where the thing twists in a weird direction is that he's saying what you're winning them with is garbage. You're not winning them with anything that is actually legitimate, and what you win people with is what you win people to. So if you win them with your weird Pharisaic legalism and anger about this aspect of culture or that aspect of culture, you win them with this hot take or bitterness about those people over there who do the things wrong and need to be corrected, or this political issue and how dumb that Roman political party is, or whatever. That's not the actual message of God. That's not an invitation into the kingdom or to bend to the knee to the king. You've just duplicated your own mess in some poor schmuck who was unfortunate enough to be standing there while you decided to go on one of these trips over land and sea to go and make this single convert. So then you get this convert, but you convert them to something that is the opposite of how people get into the kingdom. And so effectively then, to borrow from the metaphor in the Kingdom Parables discourse in chapter 13, the Pharisees are scattering seed, but that seed contains the DNA, the replicatable data packet of the yeast of the Pharisees, of the poison that is their ideology, that bars people from entering the kingdom. And so if it grows up, you've actually got a problem that's not a win. Even though you might respect the hustle, if the seed is garbage, it's a net negative if they succeed. And so, yay, you got a convert in the name of rescuing them from judgment, rescuing them from hell. That's the language Jesus is choosing here. But because of the poisonous, false nature, because of the man-centered nature of their message, if they win somebody to that, now that person is even more doubled down on saying, I bend the knee to self and the rules of the Pharisees and this failed path to knowing God and entering the kingdom. And now they're even further away than they would have been if nobody had gone out and scattered these crappy seeds in the first place. Long story short, I know what it's like to go and duplicate in other people things that I hadn't thought through very well and that probably weren't good for them, even like the name of God and stuff. I also know what it's like to watch other people do that. See the Lady Gaga missionary cultural panic incident of 2009 that I referenced earlier. And it looks like Jesus has a pretty keen eye for what it looks like for people to really hustle on religious stuff, but they're distributing things that are false and the opposite of the values of the kingdom. It'd be better if they'd never done anything at all, because now they've made things worse and they cannot count those converts they've earned as some kind of credit or evidence to the rightness or truth or God-ordainedness of what they're doing. It's actually further evidence of the destructiveness of what they're doing. When the good farmer scatters good seed, good things can grow from it. And in that parable, when it doesn't work out, it's because there's something wrong with the soil or the environment, not the farmer nor the seed. In this environment, they might be good farmers, but they're scattering willfully bad seed, and nothing good can grow up out of that bad seed. So to the reader who's willing to read way between the lines, I think this certainly serves as a contrast to that parable of the sower in Matthew chapter 13 we were talking about a little bit ago. Thanks for listening to this thing, my friends. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.